I scaled this Shopify store to $110,113 per month in revenue just with Google Ads alone. And in this video, I want to go over the exact strategy I used to make this happen. Now, this was a very interesting case study for me because as you can see, just in the May of 2024, just about 5 to 6 months ago, this brand was literally doing $0 in revenue. But coming in with the right Google Ads approach, starting work from the foundation as we always do, literally cost this brand to go over 6 figures per month and become $1 million a year and more business in such a short period of time. That's the beauty of Google Ads when you have the right approach. But going over the specific type of brand this is actually a brand in the car parts and accessories niche, and therefore pickup trucks such as Ram, Dodge, etc. So very specific. And funny story, this was actually the very first brand which we started working with under my Google Ads agency, Your Marketing, about 3 years ago. However, after working for several months and literally scaling this brand to over 6 figures, this brand decided to take things in-house and they decided to hire an in-house marketing manager, which ended up basically reducing the entire brand's revenue by 40% month over month. And the most unfortunate thing was the reason why we're having to start from scratch with this brand again is because their entire Google Ads account ended up getting suspended because that marketing manager, although they were cheap, did not pay attention to the policy violations that were coming up. And as a result, their ad accounts actually ended up getting suspended. It was completely avoidable, but unfortunately, that was a situation which caused them to start a brand new Google Ads account and just basically start fresh. The average order value for this brand, if we go on over to the Google Ads account, the average order value for this brand is actually fairly decent. So we can see here it's roughly $349 all time. In the last 30 days alone, the average order value has stayed consistent at roughly $328. So it's a mid-ticket to sort of a high-ticket store. Now, going over the actual revenue numbers, we actually started working with this brand in September again, once they had already kind of laid out the simple foundation for the Google Ads side of things. Keep in mind, this is a brand which is almost 100% on Google with a little bit coming from organic traffic. But during this initial stages, as you can see, the results were fairly decent. They were not as bad. However, when we deep dive a bit deeper into the actual campaigns during that time, we can see that overall, their results really were not that great during that time. And this was because they had a lot of foundational issues going on within the account. So if we go from August 1st to essentially the end of September, we started work in the middle of September, but essentially during that time, their return on ad spend, which it says right here, was at 8.38x. This was because a lot of the sales were coming from this one campaign, which was focused on retargeting audiences. This was a performance max campaign, which because of the way they had set it up, was going after retargeting traffic along with a little bit of cold traffic. However, because this brand was solely reliant on Google Ads, even the retargeting aspect side of things were not that great. Hence why this brand was running this campaign at a 5.47x ROAS. Keep in mind, their break-even is a minimum of a 7x. So essentially, they were unprofitable running with this Google Ads strategy. And when you have very specific types of products, essentially products like these where you're selling literally alternators for specific car models, specific car brands, etc. Or maybe you're selling things like Ford battery cable sets. These are very specific products directed towards one specific car model. And these already, because they're so narrow, you also need to have a narrow approach when it comes to the keywords, product titles, etc. You're not able to really expand the market and go after broader keywords because just the type of product they are selling. So this approach really was not working out, which they had running during that time, which was mostly a performance max campaign focused approach during the early portions of basically July and August. And as we saw right here, although the results seemed like they were coming through with this campaign, the reality was they was pretty much unprofitable and they were relying heavily on retargeting traffic. Now, one thing you want to know about this niche and the reason why the strategy we ended up implementing for this brand worked is because there's decent level of competition within this niche. If we look right here, there's a variety of different brands coming up which sell these kinds of products. Same thing for these kinds of keywords right here. And overall, these brands are fairly big brands spending thousands of dollars per day with Google Ads. So because these were highly niche products, we needed to find a way to kind of stand out of the crowd and make it easier for the algorithm to actually scale, especially when there were only a total of 800 SKUs. So as I mentioned earlier, we essentially had to start work from the ground up because all of these products right here, they had proper SEO techniques, but a lot of these techniques that this brand had already implemented for these products, they were the same as what their competitors were doing. So that was not going to really help the brand stand out with these 835 SKUs. So what we did is essentially we started to work from the ground up, going into the actual landing pages and making it very similar to one of their main competitors within the niche, which is pitstopusa.com. Now, if we look at some of their products and some of their landing pages, we can see that overall, it's a very professional feel for this landing page. It basically fits whatever the perfect audience wants to see within this niche. They have these blue colors at the very top, which directly induce a lot of trust for the users browsing a brand like this. They have a direct phone number right here because a lot of these products which these brands sell, they're often high ticket and you need to call in to figure out if these types of parts actually fit your vehicle or not. So that's where these phone numbers come in. They're basically trying to alter their entire approach based on what their audience wants to see. When we scroll down, they have a little bit of FOMO here where they say only X amount of products left, which is something we implemented for the brand we work with as well. And then as we scroll down, there's like a little membership opportunity here where you can sign up and get points actually for purchasing these products. It's a very ideal thing to have a membership kind of program like this, especially if you're in a niche where you know your customers will probably come back and purchase other products from you, or they'll maybe want to subscribe for a subscription and they'll need your product over and over again, like supplements or skincare brands, etc. But that essentially was what we helped implement for the brand we work with as well. And finally, just a very simple layout, just having multiple options for payments, so installment payments, etc. Having more information on the shipping, because again, these things help add a lot of trust. Even though the entire feel and look of this website is very basic, it works within this niche. Now, this does not mean you should go out and copy a very simplistic approach like this for your brand as well, because every niche is different. Some niches require that you speak a little bit more to your audience with a lot of creativity, especially if you're in a niche dominated by women shoppers. But essentially, that's what we did here, setting up the entire landing page approach, going all the way up to the product feed as well, which by the way is the kind of the same approach we take for a lot of brands we handle under my agency or marketing, which if you currently run a brand doing 50,000 or more per month in revenue, you need extra help scaling to the next level with Google Ads, go onto my website at yourmarketing.com and schedule a free call with me, and let's see if we can potentially work together and make that happen. But once the product feed was out of the way, we had optimized the product images to stand out from the competitors, essentially not have these plain white background images, because most of these competitors had plain white background images, and instead going after an approach which actually makes our brand stand out, maybe having some type of packaging in there, maybe making the product be on a real lifestyle background like something like this. These were the ideal approaches we decided to take, and that is what ended up working right off the bat, because we ended up scaling the overall CTRs tremendously during this time period. So as you can see, the CTRs have already increased to about 3% and around there for a lot of these products. Some of these hover at 1%, 2%, but this was because of the first foundational approach we took, which allowed the CTRs to go up, get more users for the same ad spend or less, and as a result, increase our quality score. But that was not enough, because the next step, what we had to do was we had to work on a proper ad strategy. Now, the strategy they had implemented during the early portion, it was a very, very simple approach. I mean, if we go back all the way in July when they just started running Google Ads, we can see that essentially what their approach was a 2 PMAX campaign approach. The first PMAX, it was basically an all-in-one approach where if we go inside, all they had done was that basically added all of the products they sell within this one Performance Max campaign. They had only one asset group in here running with a bunch of images, logos, videos, bunch of search themes, bunch of audience signals. So this was like the all-in-one approach, which basically told Google, hey Google, here's a lot of my money, go out and find something that works. I don't know what it's going to be, but just find something that works. That's essentially the approach that they took here. And there was no surprise that this was not working ideally for them. And this was a very big mistake, because as you can see, a lot of these products were just spending money and they were not really generating any types of traction. Some had some amounts of sales, but there were just too many products to test with, along with all of those different placements. So this strategy was not a strategy which was designed to work, because there were a lot of parts which were missing here. So we had to kind of work based around that. We need to find an approach which would optimize based around segmentation of the products, which is exactly what we ended up doing. So flash forward to about October, November is when we really started kind of ramping up the ad spend on the campaigns which we had launched. And in terms of the strategy and segmentation, what we did, which works for majority of the brands by the way, is fairly simple. We basically added a performance max campaign based smart bidding approach, which was going after non-branded traffic. So if you look right here, this first campaign is going after non-branded traffic only, meaning cold traffic only. And if we now go inside, look at the asset group's approach, we can see the main approach, it's kind of stayed the same. We kept the images, we kept the logos, but we changed it up completely to be a lot more high quality than what it was before. And we added some of the best search themes along with audience signals for retargeting data that we had now gathered within this section right here for the signals to make it a little bit more supercharged in terms of the algorithm. And the best part of all, what we did for the product, we essentially kept all of the product feed in place and we just decided to apply the same approach as before, the all-in-one approach. However, because now the product feed had been taken care of, now we had focused on the images and whatnot, there's a big night and day difference between what the results were previously for the original campaign and the amount of sales and overall ROAS values we are now getting with this approach right here. So it's literally the same exact approach, but just changing the approach for the foundation made all of the difference right here. And of course, going after cold traffic, this should have been actually lower ROAS than the campaign to which they had originally started, because the original campaign was also retargeting. But in this situation, we didn't want to make it too difficult. We just segmented based on traffic type. So this is the non-branded cold traffic campaign. This is the retargeting campaign. So this includes shopping, but as you can see, the ROAS is much higher here because it has a portion of retargeting traffic going on as well. And if we go on over to the asset group section, we can see that this is the same approach as what the other performance max campaign we have running at this point is going after. So things are the same, but just going after different types of segments of the audience, cold traffic versus retargeting, can make the biggest difference. And what we wanted to do here, we wanted to kind of focus on the performance max campaign only approach along with a little bit of standard shopping, because based on our experience, previous experience within this niche, what we had come to find out is search campaigns, demand gen, YouTube, they're not really the most ideal approaches for a niche like this, simply because there's too much variety going on. And most users within this niche prefer to shop directly by reading the product titles and by looking at the product images rather than going through the search listings at the very bottom. And if you do a bit of research into this niche as well, you'll find that there's very limited search campaigns running at this point, even from competitors, and that's because search is not the best way to scale within this given niche. But now that things are working, it's all about scaling. Now, for scaling a brand like this, we like to again keep a very simplistic approach, because the moment we add more complexity, especially for higher ticket or even mid-ticket brands, is the moment the algorithm starts to get confused. It starts to go after a wide variety of different audiences, and as a result, it's not really able to go after that perfect audience anymore. So to keep things simple, we are focused on vertical scaling here, where all we're doing is essentially increasing the budgets every 7 to 14 days based on the results coming in. In the last 30 days so far, we have been able to spend roughly $13,000 to make back $73,000, $74,000 in revenue, and the ROAS is running at a 5.77x. This is because now that we are post Q4 when I'm recording this video, things slowed down a bit for this brand in the portions of January and early February, but middle of February is when really things start to pick up. And that's how we plan to scale, by simply increasing the budgets where it's needed, decreasing where it's not needed, and then lowering or increasing the restrictions based on how the results are overall for this brand. And of course, the biggest part of all is actually going into the insight section, which most brands don't really do, and then using the data coming in to optimize the product feed further, things such as product titles, product descriptions, even figuring out which keywords are better and which keywords need to be excluded completely. That's kind of where the approach is now taking us. But again, if you run a brand doing $50,000 or more per month in revenue and you want to scale to $100,000, $500,000 or more per month in revenue with Google, go on my website at yourmarketing.com, schedule a free call with me, and let's see how we can potentially work together and make that happen.